Hi there. I have a First Page Friday book for you today. So what I do with First Page Fridays, if you've watched any of my other First Page Friday videos, is that I introduce you to a book that I think is worth reading. And for today, I have a memoir for you. This is one that I ran across partially because of the COVID situation. There is a lot more content that's available for streaming. And I was able to start watching Broadway plays that were streaming on TV and just kind of opened up this whole new world for us as a family. So we've definitely been into theater, and there's a community theater here in town that we've taken the kids to theater productions for the last few years, definitely. But this was their first opportunity of where they got to see an actual big Broadway show on the big screen. And then we um, tapped into a few more, and one of my kids, my son, he's just absolutely hooked. He wants to do theater now. So it's been a pretty exciting progression to watch kids go from knowing a little bit about theater to the point of where my son's like, yeah, I want to learn how to sing, and I want to be an actor because this is so cool. So it's pretty awesome to see that happening. So Hamilton is the play that we saw, and then as we watched Hamilton another 4 or 5 times, became really interested in the actors and the backstory to it and what happened, and kind of how was the impetus of the story, how did this come about, and what was the idea behind the writing and the casting and so forth. And one of the characters who does a spectacular job is Leslie Odom Jr. He plays the character of Aaron Burr. So if you've seen Hamilton, and if you remember the character of Aaron Burr, this is the man, Leslie Odom Jr., who plays that part. Well, he's got a memoir that's come out called Failing Up: How to Take Risks, Aim Higher, and Never Stop Learning. And at first, I picked up the book because I wanted to know more about Leslie Odom Jr. I set aside time every day to read. I wake up in the morning, I get my coffee, and I come and sit in my study, and I just read every day for 20 or 30 minutes. It's not a huge chunk of my day, but it allows me to have something to do while I'm drinking my coffee, and I start my day off in a way that I enjoy. So that happens. So I picked up the book at the library because I wanted to know more about him. And as I was reading it, as I was reading his memoir, what I found is that I'm actually going to buy this book for quite a few people I know, because I've got a few young people who are graduates and who are in that stage of life of where they're moving from being teenagers or kind of early 20s to being more kind of making that transition into a full adulthood. And he's got such amazing advice in here. I'm going to share some of these lines with you. That it really, this book fits the bill. So if you've got anyone who's about to graduate, think about this book as a graduation gift, because this is perfect, especially if the young person likes the arts in any way whatsoever, because he talks about, of course, music, acting, dance, and keeping up with his academics too, right? So he talks about a variety of the arts in this book. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to read you the first page. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to point out some of the really great lines that he's got in here that I think just stand out and offer a young person advice in a way that's digestible. You know, this isn't reading Ben Franklin. If you've ever read Ben Franklin's autobiography, it's a little tough to digest sometimes, partially because of the language and partially because of the tone that's behind it too. This is very digestible. This is the kind of writing that a young person can pick it up and read through it and feel like they can understand that content easily and quickly. So I think that that's a big positive for it. Here's the beginning. There is a prologue, but I think that the first chapter, the scene that is set here, is more engaging. So I'm going to read this as the first line. This is the beginning of chapter 1. The chapter is called The Mentor. How? How do you figure out what it is that you're really meant to do in this life? How do you find your point of entry? How do you begin? A few people I've met seem to have been born on their calling, with gifts and dreams that stood out early on. Most of us don't fall into that category. Most of us have no idea at the start what we're meant to do or even what we're capable of. Some of us don't find our thing so much as it finds us. And sometimes it's only because of some special person who introduces us to possibilities we might never have imagined for ourselves. Like many others, I have an early educator to thank for helping me make that initial connection. Mrs. Frances Turner was my fifth grade social studies teacher and my very first mentor. And then he goes on there talking about how he was this squirrely wild kid who couldn't sit still in a seat and was a little bit of a challenge in the classroom to keep him calm and to keep him focused and so forth. And so the teacher that he decided he would go up against ended up being the teacher who ended up helping to mentor him and helping to put him on the right path. So that's the first page of the book, Failing Up. And it goes on to just point out these wonderful transitions that we all go through in life, of where we recognize that we may have these big dreams and we may have these ideas, but it takes 1,000 steps and twists and turns along the way, as well as 1,000 helpful people to get us there to that place in the end. What I'd like to do is to read you a couple of the lines in here that I think are so valuable. And these are the lines that, as I read them, these are the things that stood out to me. And, you know, you'll run into lines like this that are this powerful every 5 pages or so throughout the whole piece, because they're just sprinkled throughout the whole thing, of where you just get these wonderful little tidbits of really valuable information that as a young person, you can use this information to make good decisions, right? So here's one on page 29. On the way up, there's plenty you can do on your own. There's a great deal in these pages about how to make the best use of an hour of private time. The work you put in when no one is watching will matter far more than the work you do when the cameras are rolling. And he goes on from there. And I think that that's such excellent advice that sometimes young people are willing to listen to and willing to hear that. And once a young person recognizes that to be true, that it's the work that they put in, will put them on the path toward meeting their goals and give them that direction that they need, the earlier they can learn that, the better, right? Such great advice. Here's another one here from page 41. There is nothing like preparation to make you fearless. As far as prep work was concerned, there was all the time I had spent over years walking through the thing I loved, and there was the Freedom Theater. Freedom Theater had been a cradle and training ground. I came to it with no knowledge, no experience other than singing in church, and a certain confidence that came from public speaking. As I had a chance to observe the advanced students who were so polished, I saw a way that I could ascend as they had and make myself proud. So there are just so many good tidbits in here where he's talking about coming to this place, recognizing that he was starting at the bottom, but also recognizing that he had some skills and he had some experiences, such as singing in church and having confidence from public speaking. Oftentimes, I'll get students, I teach, and oftentimes I get students who say, "Oh, well, I'll never use that," not recognizing that what we teach actually crosses across every single boundary. There are things that I teach in American literature that students will use in every single profession. My husband is a mechanic, and he uses some of the skills that I teach in American literature class. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to make those connections as a young people. But as teachers, we really are teaching you things that can be helpful in so many different ways. And as Leslie Odom Jr. is recognizing here. Here's another line. We all have our own versions of auditions, right? Tests and tryouts at school interviews for colleges and jobs. There's a scrutiny we face whenever we choose to pursue an opportunity we desire. Nerves creep in and threaten your ability to do your best. Pressure and nerves are real, but they don't have to be crippling. The difference is how you fare. The difference is how you fare can sometimes come down to where you place your focus. You can focus on how much you hate the feeling of being judged, or you can focus on appreciation and gratitude for the fact that every audition brings you closer to the place you desire to be. So he's pointing out here a specific audition where he got the part for Rent. But he's also talking about, those other kinds of auditions, like taking tests and public speaking and doing things that are hard and that sort of thing, job interviews and so forth. That each of those experiences are a step along the way. And I'll just give you one more example here. This is from page 53. You hear a lot about the big break from successful people, but I would challenge you to think of your big break as an inside job instead of something that you'll find externally. The external worlds will eventually mirror what you begin on the inside of yourself today. And as you see throughout this book, I just read you 5 lines that come out of here where he's just giving this fantastic advice beginning to end. And this is the kind of advice that people are after. We pick up one of the big reasons why we pick up a memoir in the first place is to find out how people live and to get advice, to get information about how to live, how to make good choices, how to improve our personal relationships, and so forth. We're looking for that revelation of self, where we can learn about the person who's sharing their story, yes, but we're also there to learn about those changing points in life, that advice that can help us continue forward. And certainly it's not just young people who are looking for good advice. Those of us in middle age and older are also looking for good advice, and not just with things that sound really boring, like, what's my next financial move that I should make, but things like improving my relationships and communication skills and staying calm under pressure and things like that. Those are still the kinds of things that we all look to do. So I think that this book has 2 different purposes. One, this is the book that I'm going to give my graduating niece this spring. She's graduating from her 2-year community college, and this book is absolutely perfect. It's got a lot of great content in here, like I read to you earlier, with great advice on how to make those next best decisions, how to have a positive attitude, and so forth. But the other thing that I think is really valuable about this book is that it gives you a roadmap. It gives you an outline as a writer on how to design a memoir. So if you're working on a memoir piece and you're thinking, you know what, I'd really like to see someone else who's done a memoir that offers a lot of advice, this is the one you want to take a look at. This has a really nice layout. The way that he's broken down each of the chapters, the way that he's connected themes together, the way that he makes connections throughout the piece. This book does a really good job with that. So if you're working on your memoir, you're working on a series of personal essays, or you're doing some reflective writing, you're collecting your personal stories, whatever that looks like, and you want to see a piece that's really well organized and well connected and reaches out to the reader, pick up a copy of Failing Up. This is going to help you a lot in terms of getting your own stories down so that you can make that next step in your own memoir. So I hope that this is helpful to you. Failing Up by Leslie Odom Jr. I would definitely recommend. It's a really, really pleasant read. Yeah, lots of positive, which, gosh, in 2020, don't we need some positive news? So lots of really wonderful positive news in here as we make the transition to 2021. I think you'll find some good stuff. Alrighty, reach out to me if you need anything. Otherwise, take care and good luck with your writing.